I'm Bob Short, and this is Reflections on Georgia Politics, sponsored by the Richard B. Russell at the University of Georgia and Young Harris College. It's May 6, 2015, and I'm in Rome, Georgia, with Senator Sam Doss, former state senator and one of the founders of the Georgia Music Hall of Fame. Welcome, Senator.
Good to be with you.
When I see you, I think of Thomasville.
That's my hometown. That's where I was born and had my early childhood there.
City of the Roses.
City of Roses. Very good. We have a lot of friends from that area. In fact, we are thinking seriously of taking a trip down there just in the next week or so to see relatives that are still in life and to see the tombstones of those who are not. So we'll see how that works out. But Thomasville is a fine little city, and only 18 miles from the Florida line, of course, so we have a lot of folks come in and out from Tallahassee, and we have a good golf course that's well known in the golfing circles there.
Glenarvan.
That's it. A very good one too. And it brings a lot of people to
Well, tell me, Senator, how did you get to Rome from Thomasville?
I didn't get to Rome from Thomasville. Well, it wasn't a direct shot, I'll tell you that. My dad practiced law in Thomasville. We grew up there in the height of that Great Depression, so we feel like we're sort of Depression kids. But anyhow, my dad practiced law there for a while. Then an opportunity came along for him to go with the IRS as an auditor and investigator. Moved him along with the family to Atlanta, and he stayed in Atlanta and was transferred back to Thomasville a few years earlier. The second trip to Thomasville was about the same. Not a whole lot going on. We ended up back in Atlanta. Lived in a little Five Points area, and went to school there, of course, Bass, and then went to Tech High. I worked, I guess, since I was about 12 years old. Either paper route, a drugstore delivery boy, a soda jerk. Ended up making sandwiches, all this on a Sunday. And on December the 7th, I was there working, and some fellow passed, a customer anyhow came in to announce that Pearl Harbor had been bombed by the Japanese. I didn't know where Pearl Harbor was, and I don't think many people in the drugstore knew, but anyhow, word got around pretty quickly that we'd been attacked by Japan and the war was underway. From that time on, all I could think of was getting in the Navy. Loved the Navy. So I got to be 17, much to the dislike of my mother. I went and signed up and got into boot camp. Went to Great Lakes for that. Also, when I went in, I got selected by the powers to be a hospital corpsman, and that had some advantages. It gave me up a pay grade to begin with. The main part of that educational route was when we got through at Great Lakes, we went out to Farragut, Idaho, and somebody asked, why in the world would the Navy have a plant in Farragut, Idaho, just up there 50 miles from Canada, nothing else around it? And the story was that Eleanor Roosevelt, on a flight from the West Coast back to Washington, said that, that's a beautiful place. That'd be ideal for a Navy camp. And so we got one thanks to Eleanor Roosevelt. We graduated from Corps School. Got assigned to Mare Island, California, to the hospital there. And I stayed there. I had to do some ward work to complete the education out of Farragut, Idaho. And after that, I got put in a personnel group at the hospital, which turned out to be a right interesting place to be. We had the opportunity to bring home some triple amputees, double amputees. We had the honor of returning one sailor back to his home in Salt Lake City. And here I am, 18, 19-year-old, doing a burial service for somebody. Felt right honored to have that opportunity. I heard from them several years after got out of the Navy, but then lost touch with them. Had a fellow from Marietta that had been brought into the hospital at Mare Island. He had lost both legs, and I was selected to get him back to Georgia and to Marietta. Flew in on a Navy passenger plane, and of course the Red Cross met us at the airport and drove us up to Marietta. Turned out that this fellow had failed to tell his folks about his condition. So we got up to the square in Marietta, and he said, how about stopping here and you go up and tell my folks that what happened to me. And so I did and told them, and of course they were pleased with having done that, but it was quite an experience for me.
So from the Navy,
I came back to Atlanta. I stayed extra when I got discharged out in California. Spent another 10 days doing a little sightseeing, and rode home on a bus that was not air conditioning. Of course, we went the southern route, and this was in July, and it was some more warm. But anyhow, I got back to Atlanta, and applied for admission to Emory University. And I guess every veteran, or a good number of the veterans, were already there. They suggested to me I ought to check with one of the community colleges in the vicinity. And so I did. I went to West Georgia. Never heard of West Georgia till I got there. It's a small campus, but it filled up with veterans. Prior to arriving there, I think they had like 50 male students and maybe 200 female students. So picking was good. But the best part of it is where I met my wife. She was at West Georgia. And we dated, and for a couple of years, got married in Carrollton at the Presbyterian Church there. And Carolyn wanted to live in Atlanta, she thought, and I didn't. I told her no, no way that we were going to do that. And she said, okay, so we settled in Rome, and that's how we got there. I don't know whether I told you or not that when I was 17 and waiting to join the Navy, I came off, quit school. And during the time I was at Maryland, I was able to finish my education at high school level, and I got a couple of years of credit for the college. And I had mentioned that my mother was very unhappy about me going into the Navy, but she was very pleased that I kept my promise of getting my education.
So when did you get, for the first time, interested in politics?
First time interested? Well, back then, and I guess to some degree now, there's an organization, JC, Junior Chamber of Commerce, and I got, when I got to Rome, I had a job with a real estate company. We hold a minute. I lost my track there. Let me think a minute.
Well, we're getting you ready to run for
the JCs, yeah. And I got involved in it early, and of course it wasn't a political organization in any form, but a lot of politicians end up being members. And I got interested then watching they had elections just like you in state politics. And we made a lot of good friends, and I know after observing some of the going-ons there, some of the county commissioners and city commissioners, they just decided that we ought to go ahead and join up with some of the other JCs and try to get some changes locally that were badly needed. We did, and I first offered for office in '62. I was running as in the House against a fellow who had been in local politics for probably 10 years at that time. I like to say that it was a two-man race, and I came in third. Wasn't too bad, first time out. After that, I waited a few years, and I had an opportunity to run against another incumbent who had been 18 years in office one way or the other, and ran for the state senate and was elected in '68. Took office in '69.
You know, you might not believe this, but I remember that race.
I would hope so.
And I remember your one plank of your platform that you were able to accomplish your first year in office. It had to do with retirement.
That's right. That's right. The one of the basic things when I got to the Senate that I learned, you know, that there was a small group, relatively speaking, of senior citizens being member of the Senate. They pretty well controlled things at that point. And I introduced a bill to do away with the state retirement for legislators. And oh, did that hurt some feelings. Folks said, no, you don't want to do that. I said, well, I do too. I said, I ran on that platform, and I said, I'm going to do my best to get it passed.
Who was the lieutenant governor when you arrived there?
The lieutenant governor was Maddox.
Governor Maddox? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the retirement bill, they had blocked it in the committee where it wouldn't get out on the floor for a vote. So along comes a bill that I thought was applicable to the subject matter. And one of the fellow senators from Hall County came over and says, if they won't adopt your amendment, you just challenge the ruling of the chair. And I said, okay. So I did. And there again, all hell broke loose. Oh man, it was something else. Got some amendments then, and later on, we were able to get some modification to the retirement system.
What was your first impression of the Senate when you got there?
Oh, I was impressed. It had some bright people, and then you got some that weren't too bright, but somehow or another had some degree of influence. But it was a nice experience. I enjoyed it.
You were there during the now famous feud between the governor and the lieutenant governor over reapportionment.
That's right. Carter was the governor. Maddox was the lieutenant governor. They never had gotten along, and never would, I don't guess. But Carter had a plan to reorganize the state government and General Assembly, which hadn't been done since the early 1930s when Richard Russell was governor and reorganized it, and that's a pretty long time. The battle between the two kept on, and they finally, I guess you could say that Governor Carter was the winner because he ended up being president of the United States. Maddox, I think, still mess with some city and county politics after leaving the Senate.
Let's talk about your role in the establishment of the Georgia Music Hall of Fame.
Okay. Got to the Senate, I found out that Zell Miller was a country music fan as well as music generally, much the same liking that I had, and we got a number of artists that came in that Zell would invite in, and things developed. We had such talent that we should do something to honor their contributions to the economy of Georgia as well as entertainment. A group of producers and writers were put on a committee by Governor Miller, and we set up a group that was a nucleus for the Georgia Music Hall of Fame. The Music Hall of Fame met some opposition, and the problem was that we had selected Macon as the site for the Georgia Music Hall of Fame, and some of the Atlanta groups said no, it ought to be here in Atlanta. This is where the people are, and so forth and so on. But anyhow, we prevailed. The city of Macon and the county contributed to the financing or the construction, and turned out to be very, very nice building. We accumulated a good group of artifacts, of regional recordings, pictures, and all that, and it was very attractive, and a lot of folks took advantage of seeing that. And later on, much after we had left office, during the hard times that we had, we didn't have enough financial support to keep it going. So it closed. The contents of all the items that we had, the University of Georgia was kind enough to provide storage space, so we've got those items now. Whether or not they'll ever go back into a building, we don't know.
We haven't talked about your working in the state government in the Department of Commerce.
Oh, all right, that was in '59. Abbott Massey was selected by the governor to head up the Department of Commerce. That department had been a catch-all for political junkies. Anyhow, Abbott asked me to come down and help him get the department reorganized, which I did, and turned out to be something. I stayed about 6 months and went back full time with my real estate business.
Didn't care for state employment, huh?
I'm sorry?
You didn't care for state employment. So you passed that up to come back to Rome.
Right.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about your terms in the Senate. You were on some very key committees. You were on the Education Committee.
Right. I chaired the higher education. I was on appropriation and held office, one of the vice chairman, secretary, Fiscal Affairs Committee. I had a good selection of committees, and
You worked with the university system, your legislation.
yeah, yes.
Yeah, you were higher education.
Right.
Looked after the university system.
Right.
And what other memories do you have of being in the Senate?
Well, there's some good ones and some bad ones.
Let's have the good ones first.
Well, I made some great friendships there that have carried over. We had some fun times. I had a seat on the back row of the Senate, which was right in front of the press, and they would needle me a little bit. We had one fellow who got in trouble with his expense account and ended up being put on a list to get rid of. And that fellow was from South Georgia. I don't want to call his name. Oh, I think he's out of jail now. Had another fellow that always had a rose on his desk, and we couldn't figure out where it came from or who left it. So we had to nickname him Rosebud. Never did find out about the source of that rose. We talked about a good friend, Bob Bell. His seat was right in front of mine, and we palled together, and he ended up running for governor. And he came to me and wanted to know if I would head up Democrats for Bell. And I thought I'd like to. But I said, we're Democrats right now, and I don't want to do anything to mess up that connection.
He was a Republican.
Bob Bell was a Republican, yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, he got into the general election. Let's talk about some of your leadership. I know that Senator Hugh Gillis was there forever. You knew Senator Gillis.
Right.
He was there for 57 years.
Don't doubt it. That was another thing that I had hoped to accomplish, was to put a fixed number of terms for the General Assembly. 10 years I thought was sufficient time of service, and those that were there for those 10 years couldn't actually accomplish something. We've got them. I know when I got to the Senate, we had more than 57 years for Culver Kidd was a long time member, and 2 or 3 others. The 10-year limitation never did pass. We wanted to make changes where the Senate would serve for 4 years and House members would serve for 2 years, and they didn't want any part of that. The House didn't, so it never got any passage on it.
How many years did you serve?
I served 10 years and then went back home. I decided I didn't want to run. I didn't run again, didn't want to run again.
Why did you decide not to run?
Well, I had devoted too much time really to the Senate and was neglecting my business, neglecting family to some degree, and I just thought it was a thing to do, and it was a good decision. And of course, it also tied in that 10-year plan that you ought to get out.
Uh-huh. You served under what, 2 lieutenant governors?
Yes.
Or 3?
Had Maddox and
George T.
George T. Right. Yeah. And then Miller.
And then Miller, so it was 3. Mm-hmm. Well, tell us a little bit about Lieutenant Governor Smith.
Lieutenant Governor Smith.
George T. Smith.
Oh, George T. was a great leader. He had served as Speaker of the House, came over and was elected Lieutenant Governor, went on to the judiciary. He was an outstanding legislator, and one that was, I think, extremely popular with the General Assembly as well as the people of Georgia.
And Lester Maddox.
You know, I was not impressed with him to begin with. He had relinquished a lot of his power as Lieutenant Governor to a small group of his cronies. I didn't say that. Small group of senators. But it turned out that we developed a good friendship. One of the initial reactions was about him Maddox, was that he liked to ride his bicycle backwards and did all those crazy things. And I wasn't overly impressed with him. One day I was there in the Senate, and the legislation was going on. Matters came in. And, come here a minute, Mr. Senator Doss. I said, okay, how are you, Governor? Pulled open his coat, and it had his Phooey T-shirt on, and just thought that was the funniest thing imagine. But as I said, later on, even after he left the politics, we communicated. He had a health problem, and I developed the same type of a problem. And he went to Mexico and took special treatments. He came back and called me and said, you ought to go down to Mexico and get treatment. And I thanked him and didn't do it. And then he came up with some other suggested cure or treatment, and did that up till the time that he passed away.
Looking back over your career in the Senate, of what are you most proud of those 10 years?
I think my part in the appropriations and financial affairs committees, those things that we had some control over, money not being foolishly spent. I enjoyed that work too. I enjoyed being on appropriations.
If you had those 10 years to go over, would you have done anything differently?
Nothing really comes to mind. I made some bad choices, I'm sure, somewhere along the line in legislation. I don't know. I'm pretty well pleased with the results.
Well, I'd like to mention that in 1962, you were selected as one of the 5 most outstanding young men in Georgia. I'm sure you're proud of that.
I am. That was nice. That was part of the JC career, and it was a high honor.
Also, you were elected as Georgia's first JC International Director.
That's true.
Sounds like a big job.
Well, I had served as national director, and then was elected to be international director, and it was just to spread the work of the JC through as much of the world as we could.
Mm-hmm. So you get out of the Senate, you come back to Rome. I'm sure you did not stay out of politics after that.
We kept in touch with people. Sure did.
Did you choose sides in elections?
Probably did. Whether or not I announced them, I don't know.
Are there any young Doss politicians coming along?
Got one. David, my son, served on the Department of Transportation Board. He also ran unsuccessfully for state senate. he was on the county board for a while, so he's pretty well covered the political needs there in Rome, Floyd County.
Good. Got anything else on your mind?
Not really. Just other than to say I appreciate this opportunity to visit with you. We go back a long time with a strong friendship. And
We'd have JC's buddies.
that's right.
Yeah. Political buddies.
That's right.
And just good old friends.
That's right.
Got anything left on your bucket list?
On my bucket list.
Yeah. Don't you want to sail the seas or jump out of airplanes or?
I don't think so. That doesn't sound too exciting. I've been wanting to get a dog, but we're not going to do that. He'll be on his own.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today, Senator. We appreciate it very much.
My pleasure. Thank
Good.
you.
Right.